Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. China's foreign minister calls for an end to the humanitarian disaster in Gaza as he meets Arab ministers in Beijing. Our other headlines: Israeli tanks surround Gaza's Indonesian hospital, where strikes have killed at least a dozen people. Argentina sees the political outsider Javier Milei win the presidency, promising a radical fix for the economy. And crossing borders, a dispute between EU members Austria and Hungary causes consternation for commuters. China has called for urgent action to stop the humanitarian disaster in Gaza and a return to the two-state solution for Palestine and Israel. The Foreign Minister Wang Yi met diplomats from Arab and Muslim-majority countries in Beijing as Israel continues with its ground assault and airstrikes against Hamas. Ministers from Indonesia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Jordan are among this delegation, alongside the foreign ministers of the Palestinian Authority. Wang said the conflict was affecting every country in the world and that it posed fundamental questions about what is right and what is wrong.
The international community must act urgently and take practical and effective measures to prevent this tragedy from spreading. Since the outbreak of the conflict, China has stood firmly on the side of justice. We have been working hard to de-escalate the conflict, protect the safety of civilians, expand humanitarian assistance and prevent a humanitarian disaster. We call for a return to the two-state solution and the early realization of a comprehensive, just and lasting settlement of the Palestine issue.
Israeli tanks have surrounded Gaza's Indonesian hospital, where strikes have killed at least 12 people. The sound of gunfire has also been reported. A group of 28 premature babies evacuated from a besieged hospital in central Gaza has now been transported into Egypt. The babies were patients at Al-Shifa Hospital, which is now occupied by Israeli forces. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Noor, just first bring us up to date, if you will, with the situation around Gaza's hospital in the north.
Well, what is happening in and around the Indonesian hospital in the north is just like what happened to the Al-Shifa hospital during the past weeks. Now the Indonesian hospital is surrounded by the Israeli tanks and Israeli troops. There is reports about snipers on the buildings surrounding the hospital. People inside the hospital were posting photos and videos on social media, screaming, asking people to intervene, asking the ICRC to intervene or the UN, anyone to evacuate them. We are talking about thousands of people who are inside the Indonesian hospital under the Israeli fire without any food or water or electricity. These people, including medical staff, and also we have thousands that fled their homes and came to take shelter inside the Indonesian hospital. This is regarding the Indonesian hospital. Al-Ma'madani hospital, which is located in East Gaza, also is under the Israeli fire as the clashes between Israeli troops and Palestinian militants are so close to the Al-Ma'madani Al-Ahli hospital. Al-Shifa hospital, it is like a closed Israeli military base now, and we are talking about hundreds of people that are actually still inside the hospital. There is 3 doctors that are inside the hospital with them. However, there is no connection, there is no network. People and the doctors, other doctors cannot call them or talk to them. The premature babies that were inside the Al-Shifa hospital after the evacuation were evacuated yesterday to the Emirati hospital in Rafah and now to Egypt. However, 8 of them actually died. 4 died inside the Al-Shifa hospital before the evacuations, and 4 died on the way from Gaza to Rafah. So there is only 31 premature babies that the doctors managed to evacuate, and they are on their way to Egypt.
And Noor, can we talk about southern Gaza, because we understand there have been more strikes there?
Yes, of course, even though the Israeli military, the IDF, over the past weeks said that southern Gaza is a safe area where Palestinians can actually go, and we're talking about more than 1.3 million Palestinians that already fled their homes in northern Gaza and in central Gaza City, seeking shelter in southern Gaza. However, what we are seeing and reporting on the ground is a different story. There is daily attacks on southern Gaza, in streets, residential homes, actually whole blocks in refugee camps inside southern Gaza were just erased. Just during the day, the Israeli forces attacked several UN schools in southern Gaza, and we're talking about UN schools, so thousands of people are taking shelter there. A number of people were actually killed. According to statistics published by the governmental office here in Gaza, they said that 49 of the people that were killed in Gaza over the past 6 weeks are actually from southern Gaza. However, we are looking to something new regarding the Israeli war offensive on Gaza. Apparently, the Israeli army is planning to do wide-scale land incursion in eastern southern Gaza. So this made the Palestinians here confused. Where should they go? They came to southern Gaza, and now southern Gaza is being threatened. So this is putting even more pressure on the Palestinians.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Well, efforts are continuing to secure the release of dozens of Israeli hostages. More than 200 people were taken captive during Hamas's cross-border assault on the 7th of October, which prompted Israel to attack Gaza. Let's talk to our correspondent now, Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, any update on the potential deal to release hostages?
Hi there, Jamie. Well, look, there are signs that this could potentially be moving ahead. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with the families of these 240 hostages in Tel Aviv tonight as pressure mounts on him to do everything he can to get these people out. Now, over the last 24 hours, there have been talks internationally. Qatar's Prime Minister came out to say that there only remain a number of a few small issues to be spoken about, to be ironed out, while Israel's ambassador to the United States came out to say that he's hopeful that a deal may happen in the next few days. Now, what we understand this deal could include is a release of 50 women and children from inside the Gaza Strip, while around 150 Palestinian prisoners, these would also be women and children potentially, would be released from Israeli jails. Now, it would potentially see a lull in fighting for 3 to 5 days, as well as more humanitarian aid, including fuel, into the Gaza Strip. And look, today marks World Children's Day, and what these families are really pushing for is for more media organisations really to show these kids' faces, because there are 40 children that remain trapped, being held captive inside the Gaza Strip, and we know one of them is a newborn baby. One of those mothers that was abducted into the Strip was pregnant when she went in, and you know, with her timeline, etc., people now say that she certainly would have given birth to that baby, so that baby would have taken its first few breaths in captivity.
What more have we heard from the Israeli military about their expanded operation in Gaza?
Well, look, they did release these 2 videos last night. One of them was of this tunnel, which they say runs under Al-Shifa Hospital, 55 metres long, 10 metres deep. They put a drone down there. It shows a concrete shaft and then a blast door. That's what they're calling it. And then there was another video of these 2 hostages being dragged through the corridors of Al-Shifa Hospital on the 7th of October, which of course is that date that this atrocity happened down in southern Israel. Now, the Israeli military is calling for the evacuation also of Jabalia refugee camp, the biggest one in the Strip, saying that the military operation needs to expand to this area, which it calls a Hamas stronghold. And as Nora, I'm sure, mentioned, flyers continue to be dropped down in Khan Yunis, down in the south. So it certainly looks as though this campaign is expanding beyond the parts in northern Gaza, which we've already seen. Now, the Israeli military came out over the last few hours to say that it's killed 3 senior Hamas commanders in the last 24 hours. And at this hour, we don't know how many Hamas fighters have been killed, but it's certainly coming at a heavy cost for the Israelis. At the same time, more than 66 troops have been killed, Jamie, since the beginning of this ground operation.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Israel. Well, officials in Gaza say more than 5,500 children have now been killed since the 7th of October. That's around 1 every 12 minutes since this conflict began. Monday marks United Nations Children's Day, as Sarah was saying. Salim Oas is from UNICEF's Middle East and North Africa Regional Office. Welcome to the programme. Good to see you, Salim. What are you hearing from your teams on the ground?
Yeah, thank you. Just to comment on the World Children's Day, unfortunately, we were supposed to celebrate, but I think the situation in Gaza is just the opposite of what children's rights should be. Our colleagues on the ground, they are facing the same difficulties as we see, and many of them actually lost some of their own children, which is a horrible, horrible reality now in almost every house in Gaza. As you mentioned, over 5,000 children have been killed and over 9,000 have been injured. These numbers are just horrific, and these numbers should stop us and think about what is happening there.
There are movement restrictions in Gaza. We know there are reporting restrictions, and of course there's inevitably an information war in addition to the military conflict. Can you give an accurate sense of how many children are being hit by this ongoing violence in Gaza?
Unfortunately, as in all violence and conflict contexts, it's really hard to give a real-time accurate number at the moment, but we know that the numbers that we are receiving through reports are there, and they're very, very close to reality, if not more, unfortunately. Now the situation, I think the question now is how many lives does it take to stop the violence, and I think that's where our calls for the international community and to the parties to the conflict to stop for a moment and consider on this day, on the World Children's Day, to consider their commitments to the children and their rights. And I think we don't need to wait more on children who are losing their lives by the minute now in Gaza.
Can you give us an idea of some of the challenges that displaced children in particular are having to deal with?
Yeah, well, displaced children are now sheltering in places that are not meant to be shelters. We're talking about schools, we're talking about hospitals, we're talking about tented camps. So all of this is really not fit for human or humane shelter. Tens but hundreds share same bathroom. Infrastructures like water, like sanitation systems are damaged or out of service due to the huge numbers. So children in displaced children are really facing more risk of getting ill with waterborne diseases. Now with the winter coming at the door, and I'm in Amman, Jordan, which is not that far from Gaza, and the weather is really changing fast, and rain has been pouring for the past 2 days. So things will change even to the worse now for the Gazans children, and their situation is really harsh. That's why ceasefire is crucial now, and allowing the aid to enter without any limitation, continuous aid, unimpeded access for humanitarian aid is really, really necessary, alongside protection of that aid and protection of humanitarians themselves to be able to reach the children wherever they are.
Salim, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Salim Ois from the UNICEF's Middle East and North Africa office. Well, our correspondent Zhou Jiaxin reports now from the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank and finds out how children there are coping with growing up surrounded by this violence.
Bully holes can be seen everywhere in Jenin refugee camp, known locally as the martyrs' capital, the occupied West Bank. It's home to about 12,000 people.
For a long time, even before the ongoing war in Gaza, Israeli forces have carried out military operation in the camps, and that includes raids, destroying residential walls, interrogating families, and making arrests.
8-year-old Jana says families in the Jenin camp live in constant danger.
Our apartment is on the 3rd floor. You can see it from Haifa Street. And Israeli snipers always shoot bullets at our apartment. When they do, we fall to the floor.
Jana's cousin, Sadil, used to cut in style her hair. They were close, but when Jana woke up one day in June, early this year, the same day the two planned a small party, she was gone.
I found all my family crying. I asked one of them what had happened. Sadil had been killed by the Israeli army.
43-year-old Mustafa Shida grew up in the Jenin camp. He runs a theater project that serves the local community and says the impact of the violence on children is clear.
When I just was arrived to 7 years old, in my age, the first intifada started. So I don't find this yard to expression, to play, to childhood, to live in childhood life like a normal child in the world.
The theater focuses on the individual identity of children, tapping into their potential and helping them with hardship and trauma through performing arts.
المسرح بيخلينا نعبر انه نكون في اقتحام وجيش وهيك بنيجي هون بنلعب وبننسى كل شيء.
نشعر بأمان وننبسط أكثر.
And they have a message for their brothers and sisters in Gaza.
وكمان احنا قاعدين نحاول نعمل كل شيء حتى مقاطع يعني عشانكم وعشان انه يعني نكون معكم وان شاء الله يعني بتطلع من حالة الحرب هاي.
Are you afraid that Palestinian children would grow hostile to Israel and then one day join the resistance movement?
Our hope is to teach them well, but the current conditions caused by the Israeli army's behavior have put us under a lot of pressure.
The alarming fact is that in the past couple of years, a new generation of armed groups that has risen in the West Bank, and they provided channels for the pervasive mounting anger among young Palestinians at the status quo. Zhou Jiaxin, CGTN, in the West Bank of Palestine.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Competitors, but also comrades. How martial artists taking part in this year's Wushu World Championships are forming friendships away from the fixtures.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's foreign minister calls for an end to the humanitarian disaster in Gaza as he meets Arab ministers in Beijing. Our other headlines: Israeli tanks surround Gaza's Indonesian hospital, where strikes have killed at least a dozen people. Argentina has elected the right-wing populist Javier Milei as its new president. The political outsider was swept to victory by voters angry with mainstream politicians and recurrent economic crises. South America's second-largest economy has been battered by triple-digit inflation and rising poverty. Milei, who's been likened to Donald Trump, says he wants to shut the central bank, get rid of the peso, and slash public spending.
Today, the impoverishing, omnipresent state model is over. Today, the idea that the benefits of the state are to be shared among politicians and their friends is over. Today, the vision that the victimizers are the victims and the victims are the victimizers is over. Today, we return to the path that made this country great. Today, we embrace the ideas of freedom again.
An Austrian court is set to review a civil case filed against the town of Schattendorf. The town has installed electronic barriers at its main border crossing with Hungary, sparking tensions between the two EU members, with allegations that the barriers breach the EU's rules on free movement. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
Since last summer, more cars fill up the parking lots at the Schattendorf crossing on the Austria-Hungary border. It's not due to an increase in people going into Austria, but because those who depend on this route for their daily commute had to purchase a second car since electronic barriers were put in place.
These cars belong to Agfalva residents. They drive here, leave their cars, walk to the other side, find another waiting car and head to work.
Officials in Schattendorf in eastern Austria said they installed the barriers at the border to ease traffic and enhance road safety. However, residents in Agfalva on the Hungarian side of the crossing argued that the town is violating EU rules. Both Austria and Hungary are part of the Schengen zone, permitting the free movement of people between EU member states.
Blocking borders has no business in the EU. It's discriminatory, inhumane, and goes against the law.
The dispute has led to a lawsuit against the municipality, alleging that the border controls have caused financial harm to Hungarian residents who must now either travel a greater distance to enter Austria or purchase a second car.
If we establish a sort of a precedent with our case, then I believe that anyone who wants to use this very road would be in a position to file a similar lawsuit and ask for compensation for each instance they wanted to cross here.
We asked Schattendorf town officials for their comments, but they declined to respond. Since the barriers went up, Hungarian drivers need to apply for a crossing permit, costing $173, with no guarantee they will be granted access. Thaler says that this road was partly funded by the EU and that the municipality is overreaching its authority by enforcing immigration regulations. The attorneys suing the town of Schattendorf anticipate a civil case ruling by the end of November. A favorable outcome may lead to the financial compensation of the claimants and could help them in their second case before the Austrian Constitutional Court. In that case, they seek to remove these barriers permanently. Thaler hopes these lawsuits will discourage other municipalities from implementing similar measures.
We are just being Europeans, and we just want to keep our civil liberties.
Thaler and his legal team are preparing another lawsuit, this time against Germany, for extended border controls at specific crossings in Austria. He says these controls, initially intended to be temporary, have been in place for 9 years. The freedom of movement, a pillar of European integration, he says, must be safeguarded. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Akfalba, Hungary.
Climate targets agreed in Paris in 2015 are unlikely to be met. That's according to the United Nations. It says countries are failing to meet goals that would stop the world's temperature from rising by more than 2 degrees, and that emissions across the G20 actually rose last year. To hit the 2-degree target, global emissions would need to be cut by 28% by the end of this decade. The richest 1% of the world's population produces more carbon emissions than the poorest 2/3. The British charity Oxfam says 77 million super-rich people accounted for 16% of all CO2 emissions in 2019, while people living in poverty had very small carbon footprints. At least 21 people have been killed and thousands of others displaced in the Dominican Republic after heavy rain. Dozens of homes have been flooded and roads and bridge damaged. The Dominican president says the past 48 hours has seen the country's largest ever rainfall. Hundreds of athletes from around the world have gathered in Texas for the Wushu World Championships. China's martial artists have won 4 gold medals, more than any other country. But as our correspondent Tony Waterman explains, while these events are competitive, they can also lead to firm friendships.
The power, speed, and fierceness of Wushu competition is somewhat a ruse, because off the mat, many of the athletes here at the World Wushu Championships are not just acquaintances, but actual friends.
You already know what I'm gonna give to you, huh?
Like bring you chocolate from Switzerland kind of friends.
Who wants what? You can choose, but this one is for your wife. Okay. I hope she likes it.
Sami Ben Mahmoud has known Luan Duard and Haris Hortis for nearly 5 years, all having met at previous competitions.
You get in contact, you keep the relation through social media, and then the friendship grows. I mean, we share private stuff, and then we comment.
Yeah, I do think we have one of the best community in Taolu, actually, because everyone is friends, and we're actually not competing against each other because we're alone on the carpet, right? And it's the judges who decides who's first or second.
We understand each other about how we train, the struggle we every day go through.
The shared experience has forged a deep friendship. Luan trained with Haris in Indonesia for several months and even attended his wedding earlier this year.
Hey, hello. Nice to meet you.
All three acknowledge they would have never met if it weren't for Wushu. Brazil's Caio Martinez also met one of his close friends through a shared love for this ancient Chinese martial art. He and Ariel Mancia, who is from Chile, met 13 years ago and have trained and competed together all over the world ever since. This competition, though, is a little bittersweet.
Yes. For example, it's his first competition and my last one. Yeah. I am older than him.
Yes. So it's really special for you.
He teach me many things.
Yeah.
I am good today because he teach me many things. I really appreciate this, really.
But even as one career winds down, the friendship undoubtedly carries on.
There are more than 50 national teams and 600 participants at this year's World Wushu Championships, bringing people together from literally every corner of the globe. It's a powerful show of unity at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions, proving once again that sport can create harmony and friendships that last long after the competition ends. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Fort Worth, Texas.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news with Robin Dwyer at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team here in London, thank you for watching and goodbye.
This is CGTN.